Hello and welcome. This is Gist Nigeria. Coming up on the program.
A bill for an act to provide legal governance, regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry.
Petroleum Industry Bill. We look at its major provisions and how they affect you. Also, commuting in Lagos. We examine activities of yellow bus drivers as reports suggest residents lose 30 hours a week to traffic jams. And protecting the environment. An inventor from Togo makes cooking stove that runs on charcoal and wooden leftovers. Plus,
hello, my name is Olaomi Lisami. I'm an entrepreneur. Check me out.
The researchers seeking to use our interest in food security, gender and youth development to effect change in Nigeria. Many thanks for joining us on Gist Nigeria from the BBC and Channels Television. And here on the program, we keep an eye on the stories making the rounds on social media. I am Wale Fakile. Our top story this week. Now, after enduring years of debate at the National Assembly, the Petroleum Industry Bill has finally seen the light of day. Experts say when enacted, it will repeal several laws governing the oil and gas sector, enhance the development of host communities and other related matters. But now that it awaits President Muhammadu Buhari's assent, how will their bill affect the average Nigerian? Gist Nigeria's Ajake Ulodse has the answer in this explainer.
Nearly 20 years after it was first conceived, and more than a decade after it was presented as an executive bill to the National Assembly, the Petroleum Industry Bill, also known as the PIB, has now been passed by the Senate and House of Representatives. Following several failed attempts in the National Assembly and at the presidency, the PIB is now awaiting assent by President Muhammadu Buhari. But what is the PIB? Since the 1960s, Nigeria has operated the Petroleum Act, which guided activities in the then budding oil and gas industry and provided a framework for operations. Over the years, however, the Petroleum Act became insufficient.
The Civil War ended in 1970, and we are stuck with that petroleum legislation till 2020. So you can see that it's actually out of date, out of time.
When Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999, there was a hunger to make the country better on all fronts, including the oil and gas sector. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo then constituted the Oil and Gas Reforms Committee. Part of the committee's report formed the basis for a bill introduced to the National Assembly by President Umar Yar'Adua in 2008. For years, the bill dragged in the Sixth Assembly until its reintroduction by the President Goodluck Jonathan's administration, but its fate was no different. While the bill was passed in the House, it was rejected by the Senate. Fast forward to the Eighth Assembly, when the bill was broken down in parts and passed by both houses, but President Muhammadu Buhari refused to sign it due to some contentious issues.
When they came in, they balkanized the PIB into four, and they started calling the first one Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, Petroleum Fiscal Regime Bill, Petroleum Host Community Bill, and probably Petroleum Administrative Bill. But fortunately or unfortunately, after probably 6 years of prodigalizing, we have now come back again and are talking about one or a consolidated bill.
The consolidated bill, now passed by the two arms of the National Assembly, is expected to be a modern law in tune with global best practices. The PIB proposes extensive reforms in the Nigerian oil and gas sector by addressing some key elements which include governance, administration, regulation, and fiscal framework.
The institutions that we had, the NNPC and the National Oil Company and the Department of Petroleum Resources, were all under the control of the minister. So he was both regulator and at the same time a businessman. So it was like a player and a referee in his own game. So I think that role of the minister of petroleum was really one of the issues that that was a sticking point in terms of corporate governance, and that was resolved.
Another area talks about environmental management plan. Now, environmental management plan is an output of the EIA process. In fact, it is the last output of the EIA process, as the law prescribes. So, and the new law says that within 6 months of starting operation, that plan must be out.
Beyond seeking to create regulatory commissions to manage the upstream and downstream sectors and address issues of environmental pollution, the PIB proposes that 3% of operating expenditure of oil firms be set aside for the development of host communities, as against the 10% earlier advocated by the host communities and the 5% signed off by the House of Representatives. This is perhaps one of the most contentious matters in the bill.
The bill that was submitted to the National Assembly in 2010 or 2012 contains 10% for the host communities. And we decided to act. So say it was so small, but at the end we said, okay, let's see what will come out of it. But later we discovered that those who have been oppressing the area, those who have been benefiting from the oil resources, are bent on maintaining the status quo.
Another controversial issue is the bill's proposition that 30% of NNPC Limited's profits be used for the establishment of a fund for the exploration of some unassigned frontier basins. Simply put, this money will be used to search for crude oil across the country.
As we speak today, when you talk about some of this, maybe crude oil and gas, it might not be economically viable, to explore for some of this crude oil in some basins today, probably based on the current technology. But who says it will not be cheap, maybe in some decades to come?
So the world has come together many years ago to say, look, we have to reduce the use of fossil fuel. Unfortunately, Nigeria seems to just be waking up to how it can maximize the exploitation of its own fossil fuel. So that is an anathema. It is not something that is in consonant with the direction the world is going.
At a time when oil is going to be abandoned by the buyers, by the whole world, providing alternative energy. You are saying you are spending 30% to look for oil, whereas the bill from the executive contains 10%.
Other key elements of the bill include the creation of a profit-centered entity to be known as the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited under the Company and Allied Matters Act. The bill stipulates that government will own all the shares in this entity through the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, with an eventual aim of sale of shares to Nigerians.
Let them tell me the people who are getting the oil subsidy. So if you put it in the Ministry of Finance, the same thing that is going on now will go on.
While the PIB may represent itself as the solution to the bulk of the challenges plaguing the oil and gas industry, experts believe salient questions must be answered.
To what extent can this PIB help in galvanizing and instigating investors to come in, contract, whether they are local or international investors, to the point where local communities and Nigerians locally will benefit?
And I want to invite anybody to fly over the Niger Delta. It is an eyesore. You will see wide expanse of forest and rivers covered in oil and vegetations dying. This bill does not address that. What it addresses is future pollution. And what happens to the previous ones that has already caused the people to lose their livelihood?
As the bill awaits presidential assent, key players are divided as to what the fate of the PIB should be as it inches close to becoming a law.
The bill might not be perfect, there might be controversial issues, but I don't think that we should wait for the bill to be perfect before he assents it. I think the bill should go through the process and should breathe a fresh, new lease of life into the industry.